is getting a chance to breathe and stretch and remind us of how God created the planet. We are meeting every day at noon Pacific time during the month of April to pray and affirm and be together and support each other to be the light. If you'd like to say hi in the chat where you're from, that'd be nice. If you would like to leave a message after we post a video about some viral act of kindness, we'd like to hear about it. There's an interesting phenomenon with eagles and crows. The story goes, the truth is that when an eagle flies at a low altitude, then the crows come and peck at it, especially if it has a piece of food. Well, what the eagle does if it gets tired of being pecked by crows is to raise its altitude because it's had a much bigger wingspan, it's much stronger. And there's a certain point at which the crows cannot reach the eagles at a higher altitude. So we have a metaphor here for consciousness that when you are vibrating at a low frequency, at a low altitude, when you're concerned with worldly things and fears and resistances and petty stuff, so then you're an easy target for crows. Now, crows could be people who are fearful, but we might more deeply say that crows are fear thoughts, resistance thoughts, doom thoughts, failure thoughts, lack thoughts. Those are the real crows that peck at us when we fly at low altitude. However, because we have a higher wingspan, who we are as divine beings is much more powerful, and our wingspan is much greater than that of a crow. We can easily elevate, and at some point the crows can't touch us because we're at a whole different altitude. Now, if you've flown an airplane, this is exactly what airplanes do when they hit turbulence. The pilot comes on and says we're changing our altitude because the turbulence is happening only at a particular altitude. And usually the plane will raise its altitude, and the minute it raises its altitude, the turbulence cannot touch it anymore. So what we want to do during this period of challenge on the planet is raise our altitude, also known as raising our frequency. Now, we quoted Nikola Tesla the other day. I'll quote him again. He said, if you want to find the secrets of the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration. So disease and healing function at two entirely different frequencies, fear and love as well. So fear and disease function at a very dense frequency. It's a very like a boom, boom, like a real bass kind of frequency. Healing functions at a much lighter frequency, like flutes, let us say. And so if you are in a healing frequency, you become impervious to disease because you cannot have your radio tuner set to two channels at the same time. You're either on boom, boom, boom station or higher frequency station. And B, if you happen to contract disease or face it in any way, the quickest and most powerful way to heal any disease is to raise your frequency. How do you do that? Meditate, pray, do yoga, walk in nature, play music, read uplifting books, watch uplifting videos, have uplifting conversations. It's easy, but you have to have the will and intention to raise your frequency consciously. Usually no one is going to raise your frequency for you. You have to participate in it. You will meet other people there who can support you, but you have to participate in it. Now, I'll give you an interesting story. I knew Uri Geller. Do you know who Uri Geller was? He's still around, I believe. He was the most famous psychic back in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. He gained worldwide notoriety for bending spoons and doing all kinds of psychic demonstrations. Now, I'm not a big fan of psychic demonstrations, but I co-presented a program with Uri in Greece many years ago. And I found that he had terrific energy. He was probably in his early 50s at the time. He looked like he was maybe 30. And just to be around him was like being around a sparkling energy. And I saw him do some amazing things because his life force was so great. Once again, lots of people criticize him for being a showman, have ego and all that, but I'm not concerned with that. I'm concerned with the fact that he vibrated at a very high frequency. And by the way, that movie Phenomenon, starring John Travolta, was based on Uri Geller's life loosely. So just to be in his presence was uplifting. And I enjoyed being with him. We went out to dinner and talked, and he's a really nice, very sweet guy. And I saw him doing something pretty interesting. As part of this convention that we were both co-presenting at, he stood at the front of the lecture hall and he placed a small packet of radish seeds in the palm of his hand. And there was a video camera that was projecting onto a screen for the large group to see, maybe 6 to 10 inches from his hand. And I was sitting in the front row. And what happened was, as he held these radish seeds in his hand, he energized them, and they literally began to sprout. Like over a period of couple, 3, 5 minutes, we saw with our own eyes these little radish seeds sprouting until they had little tiny leaves on them. His life force was so strong that he accelerated growth in something that would have taken weeks to accelerate. I don't believe there's any trickery involved. The most telling aspect of his character was that there was a little girl who came a far distance who was ill, and he worked on her, and he gave her love and kindness and laid on hands and prayed for her. And to me, that was a telling mark of his character. He may have character flaws as well. Not my business. But when somebody has a healing energy, they want to give it and share it, and it happens it manifests in many different ways. Now, let's go back to the idea of healing as frequency and being impervious to disease. So, I have a dear friend named Corinne Zupko. She's a Course in Miracles teacher, and she told me this story a couple weeks ago. She said that for many years she had anxiety about getting sick, and one of her biggest fears was getting Lyme disease. She lives in New Jersey, and there's lots of ticks and Lyme disease in the Northeast. And she said a while back, she went for a blood test. And this blood test indicated that at some point, she had actually contracted Lyme disease. The record of that was in her bloodstream. However, that's a big however, because she was not a vibrational match to it, she was functioning at a higher frequency, it never manifested in her body. So could that be a hint and a clue for what's happening now? That you're impervious to disease, that you're not a match to. You literally become invisible and untouchable to the frequency that does not match you. How cool is that? Now, there's a famous story you've probably heard about when Columbus arrived in the Americas, that when the Native Americans, I think this was down in the Caribbean, I believe, one day they saw these various canoes with the sailors from Columbus's ships coming ashore. And they asked these men, "Where did you come from?" And the men said, "Oh, those clipper ships right there." And the clipper ships were actually parked away out from the harbor, totally in sight of the natives, but they did not see them because it was not in their reality. They had no idea what a clipper ship was. They never saw it, and they didn't believe in it. And because it was not a part of their reality, even though it was physically there, it did not impinge on their consciousness until these sailors pointed it out to them. So consciousness is the key to perception. Perception is the key to vision, and vision is the key to frequency, and frequency determines the world that you live in. I'll tell you a more personal story that's quite relevant. One of my students was dating a guy named Chris. She was a coach trainee of mine. By the way, we do have a holistic coach training that starts in September if you'd like to become a holistic coach. So go to my website, alancohen.com. So this lady had been dating a guy named Chris. And after a while, she decided he was unavailable. So she didn't want to see him anymore. And she said to me in coaching, she said, "I made up my mind then I'm not going to see unavailable men anymore. Good. A month later, she tells me, well, I was shopping in the mall with my 10-year-old boy, and he starts tugging at my sleeve. What's going on? Mommy, why aren't you talking to Chris? Well, why would I talk to Chris? Because he's been standing right here, trying to get your attention. Now, what happened was synchronistically, Chris just happened to be in the mall, and he went to say hi to her. She did not even see him, even though he was standing within her field of vision, and she remembered her affirmation, I refuse to see unavailable men anymore. Her subconscious took her seriously, and because she had defined Chris as an unavailable man, even though he was actually in her physical field of vision, she did not see him. He was invisible to her. So when you are in a healing frequency, disease becomes invisible to you. You might be aware of it at a distance, but it cannot enter your living room or your heart or your body. Now, let's flip this now. When you are at choice about the world you wish to live in, and you are vibrating at the frequency that you choose, a positive, healing, well-being frequency, so then everything that matches you shows up for a good reason. So I was telling about my coaching program. So we did a program in Hawaii a couple of years ago. As part of this coach training, there's a 4-day retreat on the Big Island of Hawaii. And we had a lovely group come. And there's a lovely lady from France who came, Lydie, who watches many of our videos. She might be on today. Hello, Lydie, if you're there. And she flew from Paris to participate. And over lunch, they were talking with some of the participants. And another lady who was in the training said, yeah, I was in Paris as an exchange student many, many years ago. And Lydie asked her, where did you stay? And this other lady gave her the information and the address down to the street and apartment. And Lydie said, oh my God, that's my apartment. I bought that apartment. So what are the chances that one lady stayed in a specific apartment in Paris 20 years ago, sitting in Hawaii at a very remote little retreat center in a beautiful nature spot, talking about her stay in Paris, and it's exactly the same apartment that is owned by the lady she's sitting next to. How does stuff like that happen? Well, the law of attraction is real. People make fun of it. It's been misused in many ways. But the law of attraction is absolutely real. It is a scientific formula, whatever you want to call it. And what it says that what you're thinking and what you're feeling and what you're speaking and what you're doing sends out a vibration, and everything that matches that vibration shows up. And everything that is not a match to that vibration cannot enter your experience. That's why there are certain kinds of people that you keep meeting over and over again, certain kinds of experiences you keep having over and over again. And there are certain kinds of people and experiences that you will never interface with in your entire life because you're not a vibrational match to them. So what we need to do is make our very best effort to keep our mind and heart and space in the frequency. Healing is a frequency. Prosperity is a frequency. Healing is a form of prosperity, and prosperity is a form of healing. They're not really different. When you're in the high vibration of healing or prosperity, you attract the other. So thinking, speaking, worrying about thoughts of lack, whether it's lack of health or lack of money, that's going to drop you to a low frequency. Talking about your vision of recovery, talking about your vision of well-being, talking about your vision of service, that's going to raise your frequency. And, you can go up and down in frequency many times a day. So do your spiritual practice, put your right mind on, connect with people you love, have some fun, lighten up, play, value the gifts of this moment. And I swear to you, there are many. And you will establish yourself in a healing frequency. As you do, you will now spill over to everybody else who is either in healing or looking for healing, and you will spill your healing as prosperity onto them, because the laws of God are absolutely scientific, and the frequency you establish yourself in your experience becomes real in your experience and spills over to the entire world. What a blessed universe we live in. I feel so blessed. And I feel blessed for you joining me each day. Thank you for showing up. We'll continue faithfully to the end of April. Spread the light, spread the love. You are deeply loved, and all is well. Have a beautiful day.